You turn off the highway, and the first thing you notice isn't the buggy. It's the quiet. No mower running 2 farms over, no crop duster, no white pickup with a pest control logo parked in a gravel driveway. Somewhere behind that farmhouse is a garden that has to feed a family of 9 through the winter, and nobody is coming to spray it. That's the real question behind the postcard image. More than 400,000 Amish live across North America now, spread over roughly 32 states, and by most estimates, that number keeps climbing by 3 to 4% a year. Every one of those households grows food, stores food, and keeps animals, using almost none of the tools the rest of American agriculture leans on to keep insects and rodents from eating the harvest first. No synthetic pesticide trucks, no electric bug zappers, no pest control contract with a company that shows up quarterly and sprays the foundation. So how does a community this size keep its homes and barns from being overrun? Not with one secret, with a stack of small, unglamorous habits. And the stack gets more serious the further you walk from the garden gate. Start where it's easiest, because even here, the stakes are real. An Amish garden in a place like Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, or Holmes County, Ohio, is planned less like a flower bed and more like a chessboard. Marigolds go in next to the tomatoes, not for looks, but because their roots put off a compound nematodes don't like. Basil goes in near the tomatoes too, tucked 12 to 18 inches from the stem. And it does double duty against aphids and whiteflies. 3 sisters planting, corn, beans and squash, sharing one mound, isn't folklore. The beans feed nitrogen into soil the corn is draining, and the squash's broad leaves shade out the weeds that would otherwise host pests underneath. When the marigolds and the basil aren't enough on their own, out comes the diatomaceous earth, a fine white powder ground from the fossilized shells of ancient algae. It feels like flour between your fingers. To a soft-bodied insect, it's closer to crawling across broken glass. And it dries the pest out from the outside in. The catch is that it only works dry. One good rain and the barrier is gone. So the whole household learns to watch the sky and reapply the morning after a storm, the same way you'd learn to reset a trap. Then there's the stuff that sounds almost like a kitchen recipe. Some Amish gardeners have long sworn by a stream of blackstrap molasses poured into the potato trench before planting, on the theory that sweeter soil keeps the potato beetles away. And gardeners who've tried it report the grasshoppers and flea beetles back off too. Nobody's run a controlled trial on that one, and it should be taken as a shared field observation rather than settled science. But it costs a few dollars a gallon, and it's been passed farm to farm for generations, which in this world counts as a kind of proof. That's the garden. Annoying, manageable, solved mostly with plants and powder. Walk 20 feet toward the spring house, and the stakes change. Whatever survives the garden ends up in storage. And storage is where a bad pest season stops being an inconvenience and starts being a hungry winter. Root cellars keep produce cool without electricity. But cool and dark is exactly what draws mice looking for an easy meal in October. So the ceiling gets serious. Jars are glass, not plastic, because rodents can chew through plastic in an evening. Grain goes into galvanized metal cans with tight lids instead of paper sacks. Coffee grounds get scattered around vulnerable crops and storage edges, partly because slugs avoid the texture, partly because the leftover grounds feed nitrogen back into the compost pile later. None of it is dramatic. All of it is the difference between a pantry that lasts to April and one that runs out in February. And that's before the animals even enter the picture, which is where things stop being about food quality and start being about whether the animals themselves survive the year. A dairy farm or a horse and buggy operation without modern pesticides has to solve fly control and rodent control at the scale of a barn, not a garden bed. And a fly problem in a barn isn't cosmetic. Flies spread disease between animals fast enough to threaten a whole herd. And a rodent problem in a feed room can contaminate grain a family was counting on to get livestock through winter. The tool of choice here has fur and doesn't need a paycheck. Barn cats, kept semi-feral and usually never named the way a house pet would be, are the standing rodent patrol on almost every Amish farm you'll visit. Guinea fowl and ducks do something similar in the open air, working through grass and mud, eating ticks and beetle larvae by the hundred over a season, loud enough that you hear them working before you see them. It isn't glamorous labour, it's also free, and it never calls in sick. Fly control gets a more hands-on answer, starting with sticky tape strips that hang from barn rafters in long amber ribbons. Manure gets managed on a strict schedule because flies breed in wet manure within days, and a family that mucks stalls every morning instead of every few days is running a fly control program, whether they'd call it that or not. Some communities use fly parasites, tiny non-stinging wasps that lay their eggs inside fly pupae and are sold specifically for organic livestock operations. It looks like nothing is happening. It's actually biological warfare at a scale you need a magnifying glass to see. So the barn holds. But the threat that scares a farm family the most isn't out in the field or the stalls at all. It's the one already living in the walls of the house. Rodents and insects that get into a farmhouse threaten more than comfort. Mice contaminate stored food and can carry disease into a kitchen where meals are cooked from scratch for a dozen people. Moths get into the wool and the quilting fabric that represents months of a woman's labour, and in some households, real income from selling handmade goods. The response here leans on the oldest trick in the book: keep them from getting a foothold in the first place. Gaps around foundations and window frames get sealed before winter, same as anyone would weatherproof a house. Except here, it's also the pest control plan, not a separate chore. Cedar handles the closets. Cedar blocks and cedar chips go into the chests where wool and quilts are stored because the oil disrupts a moth's sense of smell enough that it won't lay eggs there. Lavender and mint work the same angle, bundled and hung in linen closets, doing quiet work nobody notices until you compare a treated closet to an untreated one after a season. And here's where the whole premise of no modern tech gets slightly wrong. The honest version of this story is more interesting than the myth. Chemical-free is the phrase you'll see slapped across gardening blogs and homestead videos about Amish pest control. And it isn't quite accurate. What's actually being avoided is synthetic pesticide, the manufactured compounds developed since the mid-20th century. Plenty of Amish farms, especially the more market-oriented ones selling produce commercially, do use pest control substances. Sulfur and copper-based fungicides show up on tomato and potato plants. Some households use naturally derived insecticides like pyrethrin, which comes from chrysanthemum flowers, or Bt, a bacteria that targets caterpillars specifically and is approved for organic certification nationwide. And the line isn't even the same from one settlement to the next. Old order communities in one county can be stricter about outside inputs than new order communities 2 counties over. Because Amish isn't one rulebook. It's roughly 40 different affiliations, each drawing the line on technology a little differently. The real skill on display isn't rejecting every substance on Earth. It's knowing exactly which ones don't cost you anything in the long run, and refusing the ones that do. That single fact reframes everything you just watched. This was never a story about a community that discovered some secret raid never patented. It's a community that built redundancy into every single layer instead of relying on one chemical fix for all of it. So that no single point of failure, one bad spray, one resistant pest, one bankrupt supplier, can take the whole system down at once. Because here's the part that doesn't show up on the gardening blogs. When a conventional farm's pest control fails, there's a phone number to call. A truck comes. When an Amish farm's system fails, there is no truck coming. No emergency delivery of pesticide, no same-day extermination service. Because the whole point of the lifestyle is that you don't build your food security around a supply chain you don't control. So the redundancy isn't a quirky aesthetic choice, it's the actual safety net. Marigolds fail sometimes. Diatomaceous earth washes off in a storm nobody predicted. But the barn cat is still there. The guinea fowl are still working the yard, the cedar is still in the chest, and none of those layers depend on the others holding. And the technology that actually keeps that redundancy running isn't a product at all. It's the network. Amish communities pass pest knowledge the way other communities pass recipes, farmer to farmer, church district to church district, published in weekly papers like The Budget and Die Botschaft that circulate news and advice between settlements hundreds of miles apart. A trick that works in a Holmes County garden gets mentioned in a letter, shows up in a Lancaster kitchen the next season, gets adjusted for different soil, gets passed on again. That's the real infrastructure, not a single tool, a slow, decentralized information system that's been quietly running for 2 centuries without a server anywhere in it. So the next time you see a headline calling this the secret nobody wants you to know, remember what you actually just watched. There's no secret. There's a family that sealed the foundation before the frost came, planted the marigolds because their grandmother did, kept a cat nobody named, and understood something the modern world forgot the moment the exterminator's number went into a phone. That if you build enough small defences instead of one big one, you don't need a rescue. You were never depending on one anyway. Was that the trade worth making? Give up the convenience of a phone call and a chemical fix in exchange for never being able to fail all at once. 400,000 people, and counting, seem to think so.